Lingue Originali.
Un nuovo appuntamento con Lingue Originali nell'edizione dedicata alla letteratura in lingua inglese. Stiamo sfogliando con Marco Piovaz il romanzo Middle England di Jonathan Coe. È un quadro molto comico ma anche molto serio, quello che Jonathan Coe dipinge della vita pubblica e privata in Gran Bretagna nel periodo compreso fra il 2010 e il 2018. In Middle England ritornano alcuni dei personaggi dei libri precedenti di Coe, La banda dei brocchi e Circolo chiuso, e cito espressamente Benjamin e Lois Trotter e i loro amici che combattono con gli acciacchi dell'età. Anche in Inghilterra succede. Ma l'attenzione di questo tragicomico romanzo di Jonathan Coe si concentra soprattutto sui membri più giovani della famiglia Trotter, come la figlia di Lois, Sophie, una ricercatrice universitaria idealista che dopo un matrimonio del tutto improbabile fa fatica a rimanere fedele al marito, soprattutto perché intervengono le idee politiche e i due per la politica si allontanano. Ma intanto la nazione sfrigola e ci sono questioni come l'austerità, il nazionalismo, il politically correct e l'identità politica a incendiare il dibattito ma anche gli animi. Sul fronte pubblico, romanzo a parte, Jonathan Coe racconta le elezioni del primo governo di coalizione di tutta la storia britannica, le rivolte del 2011, i giochi olimpici del 2012 e naturalmente quel terremoto che è stato nel 2016 il referendum per la Brexit. E allora linea microfono a Marco Piovaz per un nuovo estratto da Middle England di Jonathan Coe, pubblicato in italiano in Italia da Feltrinelli. A tutti voi buon ascolto.
None of the guests sitting out on the terrace that evening would ever know it, because he would never share the truth with any of them. But Benjamin had bought this house in order to fulfill a fantasy. Many years earlier, in the month of May 1979, when Britain was on the brink, as it was now, of a momentous general election, he had sat in a pub called the Grapevine in Birmingham's Paradise Place, and he had fantasized about the future. He had imagined that the girl he was in love with, Cicely Boyd, would still be his lover decades later, and once they were married and approaching 60 and their children had left home, they would be living together in a converted watermill in Shropshire, where Benjamin would write music and Cicely would write poetry, and in the evening they would hold splendid dinner parties for all the friends. We shall give the kind of dinners that people never forget, he had told himself. People will spend evenings at our house that will become treasured memories. Of course, it had not happened quite that way. He had not seen Cicely for years after that day. But eventually they did find each other again, and they lived together in London for a few years, which were, well, miserable, if truth were told, because Cicely had been so ill and such a pain to live with. And then, in a last-ditch attempt to leave out that fantasy, a perverse effort to recapture the past by realizing his past's vision of the future, Benjamin had suggested selling their flat and using some of the money to buy this house, and using some of the rest of the money to send Cicely to Western Australia for 6 months, where a doctor was rumoured to have developed an expensive but miraculous cure for MS. And 3 months later, when the house was bought and he was starting to furnish and decorate it, Cicely had sent him an email from Australia with good news and bad news. The good news being that her condition had indeed improved, almost beyond measure, and the bad news being that she had fallen in love with the doctor and wouldn't be coming back to England after all. And Benjamin, very much to his own surprise, had poured himself a large tumbler of whisky, drunk it, laughed like a suicidal lunatic for about 20 minutes, and then carried on painting the dado rail, and he had not really thought about Sicily since. And that was how he now came to be living in an enormous converted watermill in Shropshire, all by himself, at the age of 50, and finding to his quiet amazement that he had never been happier. He was glad that Lois and Sophie were there that evening, even though his sister had come looking for him in anger. He knew that his father's petulance was simply a mask for the melancholia into which he would sink more and more deeply as the hours went by. He could rely on Lois and Sophie to strike the right balance, a balance between mourning Sheila's passing, only 6 weeks after a diagnosis of liver cancer, and trying to share more cheerful stories of family life. Stories of rare but memorable dinner parties thrown on an audacious whim back in the 1970s, with food, drink and fashion that now beggared belief. Ill-fated holidays in North Wales, the sound of sheep bleating mournfully in the fields, and rain drumming without relief on the caravan roof. More adventurous holidays in the 1980s, a trip made by Colin and Sheila to Denmark to visit old friends, taking the infant Sophie with them this time, doting on their only grandchild. Sophie spoke of her grandmother's kindness, the way she had always remembered what your favourite meals were, always took an interest in you and remembered your friends' names and asked the right questions about them. She had been like that right until the end. But then Colin was starting to look lost and miserable again, so Benjamin clapped his hands and said, "Right, who's for a bit of pasta?" and went into the kitchen to boil up some penne. It had to be penne because his father couldn't cope with anything that needed to be wrapped around a fork, and heated up some of his homemade arrabbiata sauce. He had a lot of time to practice his cooking these days, and when he brought the food out onto the terrace, just as the evening was turning chilly and the sun was starting to set, he tried to persuade his father to have a decent amount, more than half a bowlful at least, and he took some of the pasta out of the bowl when Colin said there was too much, and put some back in when he looked like there was too little. And then he said, "Is that the right amount now?" and tried to lighten the mood by adding, "Not a penny more, not a penny less," which he thought was a particularly appropriate joke, since Geoffrey Archer was one of his father's favourite authors. But Colin didn't seem to get it, and then Doug pointed out that the singular of penne was actually something else, wasn't it? Penna or something, and that kind of killed the moment. So they all ate their dinner in silence, listening to the river as it drifted by, and the whistle of the wind in the trees, and the slurping of Colin as he struggled with his pasta. "I'll put him to bed," Lois whispered at about 9 o'clock, after her father had had 2 whiskies, and was starting to nod in his chair. It took her about half an hour, while Doug went back into the kitchen to check on the sub's changes to his article, and Benjamin talked to Sophie about her thesis, which was on pictorial representations of 19th century European writers of black ancestry, a subject on which he was not well informed. When Lois rejoined them, she looked grave. "He's in a right old state," she said. "He's not going to be easy from now on." "What did you expect him to be doing today?" said Benjamin, "turning cartwheels?" "I know, but they were together 55 years, Ben. He did nothing for himself in that time. He hasn't cooked himself a meal for half a century." Benjamin knew what she was thinking, that as a man he was bound to find some way of ducking the task of caring for their father. "I'll come and see him," he insisted, twice a week, maybe more. Cook for him, take him out shopping. That's good to know, thank you, and I'll do what I can too. So, there you are, we'll manage somehow. Of course, and in making the next observation he was fully aware of treading on thin ice. It would be easier if you spent a bit more time in Birmingham. Lois said nothing. With your husband, he added for clarity. Lois took an irritable sip of cold coffee. My job's in York, remember? Sure. So you could come down every weekend instead of what, every 3 or 4? Chris and I have been leaving like that for years, and it suits us very well, doesn't it, so? Her daughter, rather than rallying to Lois' cause, said merely, I think it's weird. Nice, thank you. Not all couples like to live in each other's pockets. I haven't noticed you and your current boyfriend racing to move in with each other. That's because we split up. What? When? 3 days ago. Sophie rose to her feet. Come on, Mum. It's time we drove back. I'd like to have a chat with Dad before bedtime, even if you wouldn't. I'll tell you all about it in the car. Benjamin came out with them to the forecourt, kissed his sister, and gave his niece a long hug. Great news about the thesis, he said. Not so good about the boyfriend. I'll survive, said Sophie with a wan smile. Give me the keys, said Lois. You've had 3 glasses of wine. No, I haven't, said Sophie, handing them over all the same. You drive too fast anyway, said Lois. I'm sure that was a speed camera flashing at us on the way over. I don't think so, Mum. It was just the sunlight on somebody's windscreen. Whatever. Lois turned to her brother. I think we did her proud today. That was a beautiful speech. You've got a lovely way with words. I should have. I've written enough. She kissed him again. Well, I think you're the best unpublished writer in the country. No contest. One more hug, and then they slammed the doors, and Benjamin waved after the headlights as the car reversed cautiously down the driveway.
Ci eravamo abituati all'ironia di Alan Bennett nei cicli precedenti delle nostre letture in lingua inglese, sempre a cura di Marco Piovaz. L'ultimo in ordine di tempo, dopo Talking Heads, la raccolta di novelle che vi abbiamo proposto l'anno scorso, era stato The Uncommon Reader, la sovrana lettrice, pubblicato in Italia da Adelphi. Cambiamo completamente registro stavolta, perché il romanzo di Coe ci porta nell'attualità relativamente recente. Se poi si parla di Brexit, che è uno dei temi del romanzo, siamo tuttora nell'attualità. Io sono Dario Albertini, vi ringrazio per aver seguito questa puntata di Lingue Originali. Vi ricordo le altre: quella con Nadia Meroni per la letteratura in lingua tedesca e quella con Barbara Marchand per l'edizione dedicata alla letteratura di lingua francese. Appuntamento al prossimo episodio di Lingue Originali.
Lingue Originali.